vendor promises that they are secure, and all they need is an API key or a tunnel into your environment, the real work is just beginning. You are about to give an outside company a foothold into your data, your systems, or your people. This narration is part of the Tuesday Insights feature from Bare Metal Cyber magazine, developed by Bare Metal Cyber, and it is all about slowing that moment down so you can ask better questions before you plug anyone in. At the center of that conversation is third-party risk management, TPRM, the discipline of understanding how vendors and partners can help you and how they can hurt you before you sign or integrate anything.
TPRM is not a single tool or a one-time questionnaire. It is a repeatable way of working that connects security, procurement, legal, and the business around a shared question. What can this vendor break for us if things go wrong? Anytime you rely on a cloud platform, a managed service provider, a payment processor, or a niche plugin that touches identity or email, TPRM should be part of the decision. It focuses on relationships where an external party can see sensitive data, change important systems, talk to your customers, or affect your ability to operate at all.
It helps to place TPRM in your mental map of the environment. Think of layers like business processes, applications and data, infrastructure, and then the governance layer that sits across everything. TPRM lives in that governance layer, but it looks downward into each of the others. It wants to know which vendors connect where, what they can see, what they can change, and what happens to you if they fail. It is different from general vendor management, which might care more about price and service levels, and it is different from pure compliance, which might only check for a certification. TPRM cares about concrete exposure, this vendor, this access, this impact.
From that angle, you can think of TPRM as a set of core questions that frame every vendor conversation. What data will they handle? Which systems will they connect to? Which identities do they control or impersonate? How do they protect those things inside their own environment? How will incidents be spotted, reported, and handled when they affect you? And who will revisit that relationship as both your needs and their service change over time? These questions are the backbone of better vendor assessments, regardless of how formal your program is today.
When TPRM is healthy, vendor risk work does not start with a contract that is already signed. It starts with intake. Someone in the business decides they want a new tool, and instead of buying it on a company card, they log a simple request. Intake captures the basics, what the service does, which team wants it, and who will own the relationship. Scoping then turns that into risk language. It asks what data the vendor will hold, what systems they will plug into, and what would happen to the business if that service went down or was breached.
Only after you know the scope do you shape the questions you send to the vendor. A platform that stores sensitive customer records calls for detailed questions about data protection, identity and access controls, monitoring, and incident response. A managed service provider that connects through remote access into your network needs closer attention on how sessions are controlled and logged, how privileged accounts are managed, and how staff duties are separated. In this step, you gather not just answers, but supporting evidence, such as policies, audit reports, test summaries, and simple diagrams. Once you have that material, the TPRM decision point pulls people together. Security, procurement, legal, and the business review what you have learned and decide whether to approve the vendor, approve them with conditions, or walk away. A marketing team might want a customer analytics platform that ingests purchase data. The request comes in, the scope is classified as moderate risk, and the vendor answers a focused set of questions and shares a recent audit report. Security and privacy review the material, add contract language about breach notifications and data deletion, and only then does the integration go ahead. The decision is no longer based on a sales pitch alone.
Under the surface, this workflow makes some big assumptions.
It assumes you have at least a simple asset and data inventory, so you know what is at stake when a new vendor is proposed. It assumes people tell you about new tools early, rather than after they are already in use. It assumes someone has the time and skill to read vendor documents and push back on vague or incomplete answers. When these assumptions are not true, TPRM can devolve into paperwork that everyone sidesteps, rather than a guardrail that shapes safer choices.
You can see TPRM at work in everyday use cases. One common scenario is approving new cloud platforms for departments like human resources, finance, or marketing. Here, your questions draw out which personal or financial records the vendor will hold, how they separate one customer from another, and how they authenticate and authorize users. A quick win is to maintain a short, lightweight question set for low or moderate risk tools that still catches obvious problems like no multi-factor authentication or unclear data deletion practices without slowing teams down. Another everyday use case involves vendors with direct network or administrative access. Managed service providers, remote support firms, and some security partners often need powerful access into your environment. TPRM questions in these cases dig into how remote sessions are started and ended, how they are monitored and recorded, and how high-privilege accounts are granted and removed. When you map their answers back into your own identity and logging strategy, vendor accounts stop being invisible side doors and become visible, temporary, and monitored like any other powerful identity. Vendor renewals and service changes are another important pattern. A vendor that once received only anonymized data might propose a new feature that needs raw, identifiable records. A platform that used to run in one region might be moving to a new data center or cloud provider. A simple but strategic habit is to tie TPRM checkpoints to renewals and major changes, so those shifts always trigger a focused review. This helps you catch risk growth over time, instead of discovering it only after an incident. When an incident does happen at a vendor, earlier TPRM work pays off. If you already know what data they hold, what systems they connect to, and what they promised about detection and notification, you can ask sharper questions under pressure. You will know who to call, which logs and reports to request, and how to estimate your own exposure. Instead of starting from a blank page on the worst day, you have a starting map and a set of expectations to compare against reality. The benefits of TPRM show up first in the quality of decisions. With a clear view of data flows, access paths, and impact, your organization is less likely to approve a vendor that quietly becomes a high-risk dependency. You are less exposed to surprises when a supplier has an outage or a breach because you already know how tightly or loosely they are wired into your critical processes. Good TPRM does not eliminate risk, but it reduces the chance that you say yes to something you would have rejected if you had asked the right questions. Another benefit is shared understanding. When your TPRM process uses consistent language and questions, conversations between security, procurement, legal, and business leaders become easier. People move from arguing about urgency and cost to discussing concrete facts, such as which data a vendor can see and which conditions might make that risk acceptable. This shared framing allows you to negotiate for stronger controls, such as time-bound access or better monitoring, without always falling into a simple yes or no conflict. The trade-offs are important to acknowledge. A serious TPRM program takes time and skilled attention. There is a risk of overbuilding questionnaires that turn into burdensome forms nobody reads. Security teams can end up chasing small tools, while large, critical dependencies slip by unexamined. There are also hard limits. You cannot fully audit the inner workings of a large cloud platform, and you cannot push every vendor to match your own internal standards. What you can do is choose partners who are transparent, insist on clarity around high-impact risks, and design your own environment so that a vendor failure has a limited blast radius.
When TPRM goes wrong, it often shares recognizable patterns. One is being brought in only at the last minute, when it is socially or politically expensive to say no. Another is sending the same oversized questionnaire to every vendor, which creates busywork rather than insight. A subtler failure mode is collecting documents just to tick boxes. Policies, certificates, and reports pile up, but nobody traces them back to actual access paths or business impact, so decisions are not any better than before.
Shadow vendors are another warning sign. These appear when teams sign up for tools directly with company cards or free tiers, skipping any review. Over time, your organization accumulates a web of third parties you barely know about. In that environment, formal TPRM can only see a small part of your real exposure, and a breach at one of these unseen tools may catch you completely off guard. If you do not have a reasonably accurate inventory of vendors, your risk picture is incomplete from the start. Healthy signals look very different. Stakeholders bring security into vendor conversations early because they believe TPRM will help them reach a better outcome, not just slow them down. Your question sets are tuned to risk, with short, focused reviews for low-impact tools and deeper, evidence-based assessments for high-impact providers. You maintain an up-to-date list of third parties mapped to data types and systems, so it is possible to answer who can touch what without digging through old emails. And during a vendor incident, you find that your earlier assessments and contract terms give you clarity instead of confusion.
At its heart, third-party risk management is about making deliberate choices before you let someone else's technology or processes into your world. It brings your attention to concrete details like data, access, and impact, rather than relying on generic claims that everything is secure. Placed in your governance layer, it links business needs, technical integration, and the reality that when a vendor stumbles, those ripples can quickly become your problem. If you can name your most important vendors, describe what they can see and change, and explain how they protect those connections and respond when things go wrong, you are already practicing a meaningful form of TPRM. This Tuesday Insights feature from Bare Metal Cyber Magazine is a prompt to strengthen that practice. Look at the vendors you depend on most and ask a simple question. Do you have real answers to the questions that matter before you plug them in? Or are you still taking too much on trust?
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.